The Who Dares Wins 1 hour celebrity special, 7:30 Wednesday on 7.
Everyone's home with 7.
7 Late Night News with Anne Fulwood is proudly brought to you by National Australia Bank, looking after your bigger picture.
7 Nightly News with Anne Fulwood.
The Prime Minister gets the red carpet treatment in Jakarta but says we are not an Asian nation. Emotional scenes as members meet on AFL team mergers. And the US told its troops are not welcome in Kuwait. Good evening. On the first day of his official visit to Indonesia, the Prime Minister John Howard has put his stamp on regional relations, declaring that Australia does not claim to be an Asian nation. The declaration comes in a speech to be delivered later tonight, in which Mr Howard also says Australia will not be lecturing Indonesia about human rights abuses.
At the Kalibata National Heroes Cemetery late today, John Howard was given the red carpet treatment by his Indonesian hosts. Australian support for Indonesia's independence struggle is one of the enduring ties between the two nations, and it is here that some of the victims of that struggle are buried. Earlier, Mr Howard received a 19-gun salute, part of the official welcome from Indonesia's President Suharto at his Jakarta palace. But Mr Howard's first trip here will be marked by controversy as well as ceremony. The leader of Indonesia's pro-democracy movement is warning that unless the Prime Minister supports her fight for human rights, Australia could face a flood of Indonesian refugees.
If we don't have a feeling of safety, our citizens will try and find another place. And the closest one is our friend and neighbour, Australia.
But later tonight, in his first official speech of this trip, Mr Howard has chosen to skirt around Indonesia's internal tensions, which recently sparked riots, costing 5 protesters their lives. Mr Howard will use the speech to reaffirm the close ties between Indonesia and Australia, including the security treaty signed by the previous Keating government. And he will tell President Suharto that while both countries will not see eye to eye on all issues, they should not presume to have the answers to each other's problems. In Jakarta, Glenn Milne, 7 Nightly News.
The federal government has dismissed claims that it's considering a deal with anti-abortion campaigner Brian Harradine in order to sell 1/3 of Telstra. The senator admits he wants Medicare rebates for abortions scrapped, but he says talk of a deal over Telstra is fanciful.
Tasmanian Independent Brian Harradine's Senate vote is critical to the future of the government's plans to sell 1/3 of Telstra. But he denies he's willing to do a deal with the government in return for funding cuts for abortions, arguing he's simply prepared a wish list prior to the budget.
Many people are suggesting that there's something underhand in all of this. I've been open about this for years.
And the acting Prime Minister Tim Fischer was also hosing down reports of a deal after failing to end the speculation on the 7 network over the weekend.
There's no connection between the issue of Telstra privatisation and our correct coalition government policy and the matter of abortion or IVF program. No connection and no dealing on that score.
It was a shaky start for the acting Prime Minister. In the Parliament today, Tim Fischer was forced to admit he was wrong to claim that the record profit by Telstra meant millions of extra dollars for additional projects. He had to be corrected by the Treasurer.
The correct figure is now been given by the Treasurer to the House.
And finally, it was confirmed voters in the Western Sydney seat of Lindsay will go to the polls on October the 19th. In Canberra, Helen McCabe, 7 Nightly News.
Sydney police have charged a man with the murder of British tourist Brian Hagland, who died after becoming involved in a fight. The 22-year-old man presented himself to police this afternoon. Earlier in the day, an associate had also spoken to police. Mr Hagland died of massive head and chest wounds on a Bondi street 9 days ago. His fiancée said he was beaten by 2 men. But the arrested man's lawyer maintains that Hagland died after being hit by a bus, following a brief scuffle. And still in Sydney, an antique dealer who shot dead an armed robber has been cleared of any wrongdoing. Anton Lees killed Glenn Whiteley during a hold-up at his Dural store in the city's northwest in March. Lees told the Westmead Coroner's Court he feared for his life after Whiteley held a gun to his wife's face and demanded jewellery and cash. Lees fired the fatal shot after the robber turned and took aim at him with a sawn-off rifle. The coroner said he was satisfied that Lees acted in self-defence. And Perth police have recaptured 4 of 7 dangerous teenage criminals who smashed their way out of a juvenile detention centre yesterday. They were found at a house just a few kilometres from the jail. But the 3 other boys are still on the loose. Police believe the gang had carefully planned their escape, crashing through a brick wall and crawling through ducting and a wall cavity to get out. All the youths have had a history of violent crime. In South Australia, gun owners are up in arms after reading details of new firearms laws in a brochure mailed to them by police. The Combined Shooters and Firearms Council says the new controls are savage and they treat gun owners with contempt.
Another 2-hour queue at Theberton Barracks today as more gun owners lined up to hand in their semi-auto and pump-action sporting and military firearms. But what's come as a shock to thousands is the small print in the new gun laws, revealed in 2 glossy brochures mailed out by police late last week. Gun lobby spokesman Mike Hudson says the government wants to make it so hard to get or keep a firearms licence that many will just give up.
Clearly that's the case. I mean, our government said quite clearly before the new Act came in that we had the best laws in Australia. Why are we doing it? And that really is bureaucracy gone mad.
For some firearm owners, the new laws will prove to be quite expensive. They will now need 3 licences, 1 for their sporting guns, 1 for their collectibles, and 1 for cartridge collections, such as this.
The new laws also make it compulsory for firearms to be kept strictly secured, such as in steel multi-lock safes. Even ammunition components, such as primers and projectiles, must now be kept locked up, and there are limits on how much gunpowder and ammunition you can keep at home. Graham Hunter, 7 Nightly News.
In Melbourne, there have been extraordinary scenes at tonight's historic vote on the future of both the Melbourne and the Hawthorn football clubs. Emotions have spilled over at both meetings, where members are being asked to decide if the clubs should merge.
No merger!
These are passionate football supporters, even by Melbourne standards. And the Melbourne board members who want to merge with Hawthorn found themselves the villains of the piece. After thousands of supporters squeezed in, the lobbying began.
I beseech you and implore you, give us the chance to build Melbourne the Demons once again.
Your suggestions matter, your involvement matters, your passion matters, and you matter.
The Melbourne Hawks is not the Melbourne Football Club, nor will it ever be.
Emotions also ran high at the Hawthorn camp. Anti-merger forces took control of the meeting. After a half-hour delay, anti-merger leader and former club great Don Scott took several minutes to calm the big crowd. But the strongest feelings were aired by former Hawthorn Premiership coach Alan Jeans.
For 10 years, I've been telling you this was going to happen.
After pro-merger arguments and many rowdy questions, club chairman called for the members to cast their votes, a process which will go well into the night. A result isn't expected till tomorrow at the earliest. Dean Pelton, 7 Nightly News.
In the news ahead, a new African famine. Aid workers fear the worst and bringing the Republican push to the Royals' front door.
And jumped into the Billabong. You'll never catch me alive, said.
The Queensland Government has launched an inquiry into its own corruption inquiry, the Criminal Justice Commission, and that has sparked a full-scale political brawl. In turn, the CJC has hit back, accusing the Borbidge government of abusing its executive power. The row erupted after the National Party MP Alan Grice in Parliament last week accused the CJC's top corruption fighter of lying to one of his own inquiries. The CJC has called on Queenslanders to pressure the government into scrapping the inquiry. The spiritual leader of the world's Buddhists, the Dalai Lama, has defended the Iraqi leader Saddam Hussein in a speech in Melbourne tonight. The Dalai Lama said he deplored the military dictatorship. However, he said the Iraqi leader was not the only one to blame for the violence in the Gulf. The Dalai Lama pointed the finger at the world arms trade.
So things are so complicated. So actually, because of arms trade, eventually arms reach wrong person's hand.
The Dalai Lama will address the National Press Club in Canberra tomorrow. In the Gulf, the US has suffered a major rebuff, with Kuwait refusing to allow 3,000 extra troops to land on its territory. The White House says it's only a temporary delay, and Iraq could still face a military strike.
More American firepower headed towards the Persian Gulf today. The giant aircraft carrier Enterprise moved through the Suez Canal. But the US build-up hit an unexpected snag when Kuwait's rulers told America's Defense Secretary it was not ready, at least not yet, to accept the 3,000 or so troops getting ready to leave their base in Texas. Apparently the troops got their orders before anyone in Washington asked Kuwait if they could come.
As far as I know, there is nothing irregular or troubling here.
What the White House called a communications error, Republicans called a foreign policy in disarray.
Now, if the country you're trying to defend tells you they won't accept the troops to defend them because they don't agree with you that there's a danger, I'm not sure exactly what we're accomplishing.
Washington did get permission from Bahrain to base more F-16s there and expects Kuwait to allow American troops in soon. In northern Iraq, the first of thousands of Kurdish refugees crossed the border into Turkey. Many had been working for American organizations and now fear retribution from Saddam Hussein. In the United States, Tony Coughlin, 7 Nightly News.
Relief workers in Liberia are struggling to save thousands of starving children. Desperate civilians have been streaming out of the jungle since a ceasefire was called 2 weeks ago. They had been living on leaves while hiding from warring factions, but for many the emergency aid is too late. Fighting has ravaged the West African nation for the past 7 years, claiming 150,000 lives. The royal family is holding crisis talks in Scotland in a bid to restore its tarnished image. The Queen and her 2 divorced sons, Prince Charles and Prince Andrew, have flown to Balmoral Castle for the meeting. Sweeping changes are to be discussed over the next 2 days to boost the family's flagging popularity and ensure the monarchy's survival. Meanwhile, one Australian has taken his Republican campaign direct to the royal family. The singer John Williamson thumbed his nose at the monarchy by unfurling his Australian Republic flag outside Buckingham Palace.
John Williamson's UK debut at Wimbledon Theatre and Britain's first taste of this true blue Republican. His favoured design for a new Aussie flag served as a backdrop. It was clear this tour was for more than just music.
It's not our Queen, I don't think, not at all, no. Yeah. And the Union Jack's got to go too, so.
Although he marvelled at the splendour of Buckingham Palace, he seized the chance to bulldoze the road to a republic and fly the flag in the face of the royals. He enlisted the support of an Aussie legend living in London.
Tie me kangaroo down, tie me kangaroo down.
And ended this night of Australiana by launching his own waltzing Matilda ballad for the 2000 Olympics.
You'll come a waltzing Matilda.
It was enough to bring a tear to the eye to any Australian here for any length of time. But the big test was the reaction from the British to this staunch supporter of an Aussie republic.
I think he's absolutely relevant.
As the Brits bustled for autographs, it became clear there's much more acceptance here now for a separate Australia. In London, Neil Warren, 7 Nightly News.
Now, turning to finance news, and plans to form a Queensland super bank by merging Metway, Suncorp and the Development Corp have sparked a dramatic boardroom shakeout. Saying they're uncertain that the merger is best for shareholders, 3 Suncorp directors have quit to be promptly replaced by the government.
When the New South Wales St George moved to merge with Queensland's Metway Bank earlier this year, the Queensland government solution was to aim for a super bank with Metway, state insurer Suncorp and the QIDC. But now Suncorp chairman and prominent Brisbane businessman Graham Tucker and 2 other directors have resigned, blaming a lack of information about the merger.
They decided that Suncorp, if you like, was their baby and they'd like to see it stay exactly the same way into the future. But we know in... Well, Mr Tucker, you can have your comment in a moment.
Unless I can form a view that the merger is in the best interest of Queensland, then I find that I've got a legal problem.
A new chairman and directors have been appointed. Meanwhile, in New South Wales, the Australian Business Chamber has called for a cut in interest rates, saying manufacturers are struggling with jobs likely to disappear. And in more negative news, there's been a big jump in personal bankruptcies, climbing by more than 28% across the country for the June quarter. The biggest increase was in the Northern Territory, up by 110%. Nigel McCarthy, 7 Nightly News.
And from the markets today, a record-breaking run on Wall Street on Friday and some strength in banking stocks helped us to a higher close today. The All Ordinaries was up 15.5. The Dow on Friday up a big 66. BHP came back today up 14. Amcor up 10. Boral made ground up 4. Lendlease, however, fell away 30. Most of the banks surged, as I mentioned, but Bank of Queensland fell 10. The dollar trading at 78.98 US, 87.19 yen, 50.88 against the pound. The US dollar 151.25 marks. Gold at 382.70, the FTSE up 6. The Tokyo Exchange closed for a holiday, the Hang Seng up 198 today. Coming up, we have the injury list in the lead up to crucial AFL and league finals, and Mick Doohan does it again, 3-time world champion. Now to news in sport, and sore ribs or a leg injury? That's the question being asked about Essendon's Mark McCurry in the lead up to Saturday night's preliminary final against the Swans. There are conflicting reports about his injury, and late this afternoon McCurry added to the intrigue.
Essendon's star forward arrived at the medical centre in Moonee Ponds late this afternoon for a 2-hour stint in the hyperbaric chamber.
Oh, probably a 50-50 chance at this stage, but yeah, I'm doing everything I can to try and get myself up.
It was this seemingly innocuous tackle that caused the injury. The Bombers claiming it's a sore buttock, but at quarter time he did appear to be pointing to his ribs. Wingman Paul Barnard is also under a cloud after hobbling from the ground in the last quarter with an ankle injury. At this stage, he's rated a 50-50 chance of playing. Up in Sydney, the Swans have a strong list to select from, and there seems little doubt Tony Lockett will return after a month on the sidelines with a groin injury.
Yeah, might be able to squeeze him in there somewhere. He'll be playing for sure, so yeah, it'd be good to have him back.
And the final act of the Eagles' Peter Sumich's AFL career may be played out at the tribunal on Wednesday night. Sumich, who was dragged early against the Bombers, has been cited on video for striking Gavin Wanganeen.
Wow. Brisbane too is relying on the benefits of the hyperbaric treatment to assist in the recovery of key players. Even though the treatment is usually effective, the Bears forward, Jason Ackermanis, is still likely to miss Saturday's clash with North Melbourne.
For the second day in a row, the Bears star trio is back at the State Sports Centre in Sydney, undergoing further treatment. Michael Voss looked more like a fighter pilot, but the hyperbaric chamber has seen his ankle improve dramatically over the past 24 hours, but it remains a race against time. Ackermanis, though, is struggling, and his hamstring looks like forcing him out of Saturday, while ruckman Matthew Clark is battling an ankle injury, but he should play. And while the Bears sweat on the fitness of several of their star players, North Melbourne has had the luxury of the week off. Their only minor concern, Stuart Anderson, who's unlikely to play against Brisbane. While Anderson made it onto the training track at Arden Street tonight, the Kangaroos are unlikely to risk him. Apart from Anderson, North is fresh after the week off and set to take the next step. Jim Wilson, 7 Nightly News.
Well, the failure of the Brisbane Broncos to live up to expectations in finals football is likely to have severe repercussions. After buckling under to Cronulla at the weekend, Broncos chairman Paul Morgan has warned some big names face the chop.
The Broncos' post-season party was on inside. For some, it will be their last with the club, as the chairman found little to celebrate following Saturday's loss.
Well, I guess it could be said we're a bunch of chokers, couldn't it? I think it's also a fair comment to say that maybe a couple of guys have been around for too long.
The axe expected to fall on 2 of the game's biggest names, Willie Kahn among them, while Kevin Walters will link with Canterbury or North Queensland.
Speculation that Willie's already been told he's gone. What do you say to that?
No, he certainly hasn't been. And as I said, our players will be here in 1997.
At Cogra, St George was brought back to earth with a rerun of their nightmare round 7 42-0 loss to North.
I'm going to ask him, can I be excused, I think, because I didn't play.
But Bell's presence yesterday, scoring 2 tries and having a hand in another, has given the Dragons a further crack at the Bears. Brett Dallas is expected to play on Saturday, while Billy Moore is receiving 14 hours treatment a day.
At the moment, I'd say 50-50. It's hard to tell. I've never had a hamstring. I didn't know forwards had hamstrings, actually.
Manly is firm to evens for the premiership, while there has been money for St George and Cronulla at 4s. Paul Gregg, 7 Nightly News.
The motorcycle ace, Michael Doohan, has left no doubt that he is our best ever, winning his 3rd successive World 500cc championship. Doohan clinched the title with his 2nd placing in the European Grand Prix in Spain.
The Montmello circuit was bathed in sunshine as Mick Doohan raced to stay out of Alex Creville's shadow and seal the '96 championship. The reigning champion had to keep the Spaniard out of second place to guarantee his title, and that fueled a titanic struggle.
Got him!
They traded places twice on the last lap. When Creville almost lost control, Doohan charged.
Oh, that's all he needs.
Carlos Checa took the flag, but all eyes were on the 2 and 3 spots. The Aussie hanging on to be only the third rider to win 3 successive championships.
And there it is, the World Championship, number 3.
And payday for Curry Webb, her final round 69 giving her a 2-shot victory at the Safeco LPGA Classic and a winner's cheque for over 100,000 Australian dollars. Mark Beretta, 7 Nightly News.
Nice one. Still to come, Tuesday's forecast, and Danny DeVito, happy to do it his way.
Why would you want to read when you got the television set sitting right in front of you?
Now let's have a look at the national weather outlook for tomorrow, and warm weather will continue, but a brief change is on the way. Most of Australia was dry and sunny today, but a series of small cold fronts is crossing the south. Tomorrow afternoon, a front will pass over New South Wales with cooler southerly winds, but staying dry as another high system tucks in behind it. In Queensland, fine all the way through. Temperatures in the high 20s, very warm, 35 degrees in Mount Isa, Brisbane 24. In New South Wales, fine and warm again. Sydney a top of 26, Orange and Wagga 21, Canberra 19. For Victoria, mostly fine in Ballarat, fine in Melbourne with 20 degrees, Launceston fine but rain for Hobart 14. In Adelaide, becoming fine and 18, a bit of rain about, rain for Perth and 20, Alice Springs 34. And finally tonight, Hollywood funny man Danny DeVito has waltzed into Australia to promote his latest movie, Matilda. It's based on Roald Dahl's classic children's novel, and the diminutive Dynamo says he stayed true to the book.
And so far I've been getting high marks from all the kids. Not only that they've been excited about the movie and had lots of fun with it, but that it's very, very true to the book, and they feel satisfied in that way.
Okay, well, Matilda's the story of a super intelligent little girl with a mischievous streak, and DeVito says he may even look to Australia for his next project. And we'd like to see that. That's the latest from the 7 Newsroom. Our next national bulletin, sunrise at 6 a.m. We'll leave you tonight with some happy reunions after today's return of the HMAS Melbourne after 5 months' duty in the Persian Gulf. I'm Anne Ford-Oles. See you tomorrow. Good night.
Seven Late Night News with Anne Fulwood was proudly brought to you by National Australia Bank. Looking after your bigger picture.